And we're back. You thought it was going to be somebody else, didn't you? It was just a transit. No, you just ride with me today. So I have been, I don't know, anybody, how's the Exodus series going? Good? Loving it? Liking it? Not so sure about it? Okay, all right, good. So I have been encouraged, at least, just going back. I mean, I couldn't tell you how many times I've read the book of Exodus, but new things seem to be popping up for me. That's one of the things I appreciate about Scripture. It feels like there's always something new every time you jump into it, read it, follow along with the reading plan, things like that. There's always good to grab out of it. So I'm excited to continue that series today. So fun fact about me, not really that fun, I guess, maybe, I don't know. I did wrestling for 1 year. So I grew up doing a lot of sports. Okay, I was not expecting that response. Now I'm totally back to the notes. Okay, so I played football growing up, and then I had a friend who wrestled, and one of my coaches on the football team in like middle school was also the wrestling coach. So he tricked me into joining because I'm gonna be honest, I hated it. Like if you are a big wrestler, you love wrestling, great, happy for you, not for me. But at the end of that first year, that only year that I wrestled, I was invited to participate in like a state tournament that was only for first-year wrestlers. They called it like the rookie state tournament, right? And in this tournament, I actually ended up getting second place, which was, maybe a good accomplishment, maybe not. Maybe you're impressed by that. You shouldn't be, because there's some details that you need to know about. Number one is I don't know how many people got invited to this tournament, but only 4 people in my weight class actually signed up for it. I found that out once I got there. I also found out once I got there that 2 of those people didn't show up. So in the semifinal round, I won by forfeit immediately in the championship. And I got pinned in like 30 seconds. So all of that led me to second place, state champ, like runner-up, silver medal, right? Why do I bring this up? What winning or what mattered for me that day was that I showed up and I wrestled. It's all that mattered, because that's what a bunch of other people across the state didn't do, and that's how I got my free T-shirt. But what matters for us sometimes when we read Scripture, when we come across something difficult like a passage that we're going to read today, what matters is that we show up and wrestle with it. Instead of running past it, instead of ignoring it, instead of trying to shovel it under the rug or pretend like we can just kind of platitude over it, but that we actually wrestle with it and try to get something out of it that is, what is God actually trying to communicate to me? Or what can I actually learn about his character in this moment? And so as we read this, there might be some parts that are uncomfortable or that, I'm going to be honest, I don't love this story, to just be frank. But I would ask you just today to show up and wrestle with the passage with me. So that being said, let's do a quick recap of where we've been in Exodus. So week 1, God sees his people in distress, right? They've been in slavery and captivity in Egypt. He hears their cry out to him, and he wants to do something about it. Week 2, God raises up a redeemer, and he calls us to also participate in this redemption plan to set captives free. Last week, Russell talked about Pharaoh's determination to rule over the Israelites and how it caused great suffering, and how that also can be kind of a cautionary tale for us to not be so determined to go our own way, but to be open to maybe what God has for us. And time and time again, God offered Pharaoh a chance to let the people of Israel go and stop the suffering of the Egyptians through the plagues, and yet his heart just is so determined to continue to rule over them that the suffering of the people continues and these plagues continue. And if you had community group this week, one of the questions that we talked about was, how much blame should be given to Pharaoh for continuing to kind of pursue this ruling and reigning and oppression of this people, and how much is really attributed to God for making the plagues happen? And it's a difficult question to wrestle with, because I don't think, at least maybe for me at least, I don't love thinking of God as this kind of, as like the executioner, if you will. Like we think of judge, jury, executioner, right? Like, is he the one that's actually bringing about these? And today we're going to talk about this final plague, which is maybe the hardest one to swallow, is the plague of God killing the firstborn throughout Egypt. And now this has been warned to Pharaoh all the way back in Exodus chapter 4 that this was going to happen if he didn't release the people, if he didn't set them free. But he, as we know the story goes, he doesn't. He doesn't relent. He doesn't give in. He doesn't let the people go. And if this passage makes you uncomfortable about who God is, I just want you to know you're in good company. I think a lot of people have wrestled with this, people that have been believers walking with the Lord for many, many years longer than I have, and would say that this still makes them uncomfortable, or they're not sure exactly. Maybe they've come to a conclusion about it, but still don't love maybe the ramifications of it. And I think part of it is the difficulty of seeing God is we have to hold something in both hands here. Like initially, we have to recognize that God is a just God. He is. That's ultimate, and we want him to be that way. Russell talked about that a while back. We want a just system. We want things to be fair in some way. There needs to be justice. If there was no justice, then there'd be no mercy, because everything would just be allowed. There'd be lawlessness. It'd be free range to do whatever you want. And so on the one hand, God is a just God. On the other hand, God is merciful. And time again, like even though these plagues are happening, there's always the opportunity for Pharaoh to relent. There's always the opportunity for Pharaoh to change his mind and for the plagues to stop. And even in our text today, we're going to see that God offers an opportunity for people to find refuge and to avoid the outcome of this plague. And so the big idea that we're going to be working through, and I'm going to be trying to establish here, is that the Passover, and what we're going to be talking about today, this idea of the passing over the Israelites as this plague came. The Passover is establishing a pattern of God's saving grace through a Redeemer. The Passover is establishing a pattern of God's saving grace through a Redeemer. And this is going to be important. One, for the remembrance of it, the pattern that he sets up, so it can be remembered, because it's going to need to happen over and over. And then also for us, kind of foreshadowing to the Redeemer, ultimately, that we see in Jesus Christ. And so that's where we're going to be working from. And we're going to start in chapter 12. It says this: "The Lord said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, 'This month shall be for you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year for you. Tell all the congregation of Israel that on the 10th day of this month every man shall take a lamb according to their father's houses, a lamb for a household. And if the household is too small for a lamb, then he and his nearest neighbor shall take according to the number of persons, according to what each can eat, you shall make your count for the lamb. The lamb shall be without blemish, a male, a year old. You may take it from the sheep or from the goats, and you shall keep it until the 14th day of this month, when the holy assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill their lambs at twilight.'" Now, he starts out by saying that this is going to be a beginning of months, which is really interesting to me. It's a detail that I think I've run past previously reading this, but it's almost like he's establishing like a new life for them. He's saying, look, you've been in slavery, you've been in captivity, I'm going to set you free, and from here on forward, like a new calendar is starting, a new life, a new era of the Israelite people. And I think that's a really impactful thing for us, that when we think about when we have put our faith in Jesus, when we've accepted his sacrifice for us, there's a new life available to us. It's almost like we walk into a new calendar, starts over right there. And that's what he's establishing here. And they were commanded to take a lamb to sacrifice, and they were supposed to eat all of it. And again, foreshadowing to Jesus coming, we accept all of who Christ is. We accept all of the lamb, and that's the point that he's making here, is that you need to eat all of it. So much so that if your house is too small to eat a lamb, you should go get in with your neighbor's house, and then you can kind of all eat the lamb together. And so that's what we see as the beginning of kind of the sacrifice. And the reason why is starting in verse 7. "Then they shall take some of the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts and the lintel of the houses in which they eat it. They shall eat the flesh that night, roasted on the fire with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. They shall eat it. Do not eat any of it raw or boiled in water, but roasted, its head with its legs and its inner parts. And you shall let none of it remain until the morning. Anything that remains until the morning you shall burn. In this manner you shall eat it, with your belt fastened, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. And you shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. For I will pass through the land of Egypt that night, and I will strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and on all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgments. I am the Lord. The blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are, and when I see the blood I will pass over you, and no plague will befall you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt." And so again, the difficulty here is that we're seeing that God's about to do this thing that's going to wipe out, the firstborns throughout Egypt. And yet, what he's trying to do is establish this pattern of his saving grace through a redeemer, the redeemer being the blood of the lamb that covers over the doorposts. And there's a lot of symbolisms and tie-ins in other parts of Scripture that are happening here. You see that all the land around them is given over to death or to sin around them, that there is a protection or a refuge that's going to be offered to them by God, and that there is a redeemer that is coming to, that's going to cover them. And God offers to protect you by encouraging, if you're an Israelite, you're encouraging you to enter your wooden dwelling place. You bring in your family and all of your animals, and you're going to sit there and wait out the flood of death that's happening around you. It's a callback in a way to the story of Noah and the flood that's happening around, that God is providing this kind of wooden refuge place where you and your animals are going to take shelter while this is all happening outside. Not only that, but there's also some kind of spiritual kind of perversion that's happening in the land. If we look at verse 12 again, it says, "For I will pass through the land of Egypt that night, and I will strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and on all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgments. I am the Lord." So in some way, God is trying to communicate that this is not just about people, but that there is some kind of spiritual thing that's happening here as well. And when we look back to the Noah story, you can write this down if you want to look back later, but Genesis chapter 6 is where you'll find this, is that just before God is going to give the flood, there's this catalyst that happens of these spiritual creatures that are going to come down, and they're going to lay with the females of, or the sons or the daughters of humans, and it's going to create, again, this kind of violent line of people. They're described in more detail in that passage, but it's going to create the kind of the catalyst for this like kind of perversion and violence and injustice that's happening in the world that leads to the flood as well. And so there are these tie-ins that are happening between those two stories, but God said he wasn't going to do it the same way again. He's not going to do it the same way. He would never flood the earth the way he did. And so he's going to offer refuge and mercy to all that would accept it. And so why does this matter? And it goes back to, again, the Passover establishing the pattern of God's saving grace through a redeemer. And it's not that God has to go through this plague in order to establish this pattern. That would seem cruel and not right. But instead, this is where we begin to kind of wrestle with this passage. What is God trying to do here? And honestly, one sermon, one 30-minute or whatever block is not going to relieve every tense moment or section of this passage. It's not going to, most likely, I'm not going to be able to persuade you that God isn't the bad guy in this story in just my time here. So what I've been thinking and what I've been praying about is earnestly trying to figure out, okay, so God, what are you trying to say to me, and what do you want me to share with this group of people? And what it feels like has been standing out to me, and what I want to talk about is kind of the difference between how we see when the first Pharaoh that we read about, he's under fear of what the Israelites are going to do, or that he wants to take control of them. He is going to also kind of have a similar thing where he kills all of the baby boys of the Hebrews, right? That's kind of his initial act that really sets God against him. When God tells him that this initial or eventual plague is going to happen, he says, "You killed my firstborn, Israel." He sees Israel as his first, so I'm going to take your firstborn as well. That's the justice piece of it. And I imagine that's maybe I would doubt that anybody in here has gone as far as having a number of people thrown into a river because they were afraid of them. But there is a human element to it of when we feel like our domain or authority or our power or something is being threatened, we want to eliminate that threat. And that's the way that humans kind of respond to it. And the way Pharaoh goes about it is no mercy, throw the babies in the river, and move on. And the way God goes about it is that he's going to offer mercy and a refuge in the midst of, yes, there is this act that's about to happen. And so I think there's a difference there in the ways that God goes about it versus the ways that Pharaoh goes about it. And he's going to enact his justice in a similar form, but he gives refuge and a redeemer in their place. And so this is another point, is that God offers refuge and a redeemer in the face of death and destruction. God offers refuge and a redeemer in the face of death and destruction. Now, I think it's interesting thought of whether or not God offered this refuge or the opportunity to participate in the Passover to the Egyptian people. I think that probably impacts how maybe we view God in this story. And I think you can make the case either way. I think one way, if you think maybe not, there's the previous chapter makes it pretty clear that he's drawing a distinction between Israel and Egypt. He wants to make it clear that these are my people. This is the ones that I have called as my own. And we're also going to see later on that when this plague enacts, that not a single house in Egypt is without death. There's a great cry that goes up every household. There's wailing through the streets. It's a horrific scene. And so you can make that case. I think on the other side of it, and this is actually where I've kind of been leaning as I've been studying, is that maybe it would line up more so that God does actually offer it to them. One, because I think that lines better with God's character throughout the rest of Scripture. I think God offers an opportunity for redemption or mercy to everyone along the way. And then also because as the people are leaving, and this should be on the screen here in chapter 12, verses 37 to 38, as the people finally leave, we see this, that the people of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 men on foot, besides women and children. A mixed multitude also went up with them, and much livestock and flocks and herds. And the reason why I think that this kind of indicates that maybe there were some Egyptians that joined them as well in being passed over is this multitude that also goes up with them, or this mixed multitude. So not just Israelites left, but a mixed multitude of different ethnicities or different people groups or whatever. And so the way I think this all played out was that as Moses is delivering the news of these plagues happening, people are starting to get the message that, hey, maybe this God that he's talking about is actually real and powerful and doing something here. And they want to avoid the disaster of those plagues. And it says in the scripture as well that Moses became very respected by not just the Israelites, but also the Egyptian people. And so this other picture has been going through my mind as I was considering this of just what it looks like for the Israelites and the Egyptians to maybe have some people that had merged over and had sought refuge with the Israelites. And thought maybe this God that's been moving this whole way, maybe that he has, I can find refuge, I can find safety with his people. Now, if we think about this whole event from the perspective of the Israelites for a second, I realized that as I was thinking about this, that our perspective as modern day readers, taken away from the emotion and the pain and suffering of an Israelite in that day, probably makes us read the story much differently than they experienced it. Because we see it as like, this seems wrong, and I'm not saying, not trying to make a case, but this seems like it's too far. And as an Israelite, I just want you to picture this, like kind of put yourself in this position for a second. So the previous Pharaoh that was in charge, probably had some relative of yours, uncle, cousin, distant relative, depending on how many years back, how many generations back, ripped out of your house and thrown into the Nile River. So that you've got that going on. You've also been enslaved your entire life to this Egyptian king, all because he just felt threatened by your people. That you feel like God is even maybe giving him too many chances to repent, too many chances to change his mind. Can we just jump to this last part, wipe him out, and let's get out of here? And I was thinking about as we kind of see the tension between these two groups as well, going back to the idea of some Egyptians seeking refuge with the Israelites. What would that look like for an Israelite family who felt oppressed and attacked by these Egyptian people to open up their home to an Egyptian family that was seeking refuge with them? And it made me think about my own life and the people that maybe I don't necessarily know that I have true enemies per se, certainly not Egyptian-level enemies for the Israelites, but maybe people that I disagree with, people that don't like me or I don't like. And am I willing to go as far as to open up my home to allow them to seek refuge and a redeemer the way that the Israelites had potentially the opportunity with the Egyptians? That's total tangent, side nugget, just something for you to maybe chew on. But it's something that I haven't been able to get that picture out of my head of an Egyptian seeking refuge in an Israelite's home after years and years of oppressing them and their people. And so maybe this is how they're feeling. And finally, the Israelites in this moment, after this killing of the firstborn is going to happen, they are finally going to achieve the freedom that they've been longing for. This is a people of no hope, of no future, as just slaves to the Egyptians, even having generations of them wiped out whenever that king feels like that he's threatened by them. All they've got to hold on to are these promises that their ancestors have told them about of this God that wants to protect them and redeem them. And yet here we are, and they're finally being set free. And so it makes sense that not only would they, that this would be a good thing for them, but they would also set up patterns to remember this moment in their lives. That they would set up a pattern to remember that this is what God did for them, that he set them free. And God, in fact, tells them that they should do this. In chapter 12, verse 14, he says, "This day shall be for you a memorial day, and you shall keep it as a feast to the Lord throughout your generations, as a statute forever. You shall keep it as a feast." Now, I was thinking about this. We're pretty familiar with this idea of like feasts and parties and things to remember things, right? Especially even like when there's even death or our freedom kind of came out of it. Like think about Memorial Day or Independence Day, or even like 9/11 is not really a time that we throw parties and things, but we remember what happened and we sit in that and we hug our loved ones a little closer that day and we remember, what has happened, right? And so we have these times of remembrance of things that have happened and things that have changed us, or things that, whether people died or whatever it may be, and we are still living, we have been set free. And I don't know that we do this enough with the spiritual moments in our lives. I think about a while back I was doing, I can't remember if it was a podcast or devotional or what, but it struck me like, I've talked to many people that like they know their salvation date, like they have that written down or like stored up, and I think that's incredible. Like if you know that's amazing. I don't remember that. I don't have a great memory anyway, but I don't have that memorized. I don't have my baptism date memorized, whatever. But if you had that and you were to set up like a yearly, like almost like a birthday, like this is a yearly reminder of what God has done for me. This is what I felt in that moment. This is what I remember about what God was doing for me or for my family in this season. And that's what led me to to walk with him, to put my faith in him. I think about baptism or just a time that God provided something for you or set you free. Maybe you're here and you got to this place with the Lord because he set you free from some kind of addiction or anxiety or depression or whatever it may be. And you can mark that date or that season with a time of remembrance. And what I noticed when I was thinking about the Israelites and celebrating this is how important, knowing the rest of kind of their history as a people, how important it would have been to have these moments of remembrance. I mean, I think about they're going to be put back into captivity by Babylon. They're going to spend years and years being attacked, by being scattered, by being taken over. They're going to be oppressed and back into kind of an occupation by the Roman government. And then even if you want to go kind of more modern history, they're going to then, like, we could think about the Holocaust and what's happening there. And I was looking at pictures on Google of just like all of these families kind of in Europe or around Europe, thinking about that time. And you see these pictures of these families celebrating this kind of Seder together with what they have, and thinking about family or loved ones or relatives that are being sent to concentration camps. And what better time to like remember, hey, you know what, this is a horrific moment in our people's history, but at the same time, like God has shown that he has been faithful and he sets the captives free and he has been good to us in the past. He will be good to us again. And I think about that for us as well. Like, what are the ways that we remember God's goodness? Because ultimately, like, I'm 30. I've been doing ministry for about 10 years from a vocational standpoint, and that's not a long time, but it's been long enough to know that nobody kind of gets out without needing to be reminded of who God is and his goodness at some point, right? You don't just put your faith in Jesus and like life is good forever and like, we're good. There's still seasons. We still live in a broken world. There's still times when you have to lean back and remember where God was at when you felt him strongly, because right now it doesn't feel like he's there anymore. Or this struggle that I'm currently facing, like, God, where are you? What is going on? I can't believe that this is happening. And you can remember the seasons of times when it was different. And you know that God was there for you and he's not abandoned you now. And those times of remembrance. And so I just encourage you, like, if this is not something that you regularly do, to set up practices that would encourage you to remember who God is and what he's done for you. It could be as simple as like having a verse or a board of memory verses. I remember my wife, when we were dating, she had in her college dorm room, she had like this cork board of just verses and different things to encourage her, like, thought that was really cool, but just things like that. Or even we did a whole series on the Sabbath before. This is a weekly reminder of who God is and what he's done for you and the opportunity to rest and enjoy him. You can have yearly celebrations, again, remembering maybe a salvation date or a time when just God showed up in your life. And it doesn't matter if you have the perfect date. It's just an opportunity to remember, to throw a party, to celebrate, to remember who God is and what he's done for you.